There are approximately 7,100 languages in the world today, 23 of which have 50 million first language speakers each. Let's take a look at the 5 most spoken of these languages. Number 5. Arabic. There are roughly 242 million speakers of the Arabic language. 3.29% of the world population speak Arabic, which originated in Saudi Arabia. It is part of the Afro-Asiatic and Semitic language family. It is most widely spoken in the Middle East and North Africa. Different parts of the Arab world speak different forms of Arabic. A Moroccan might have trouble understanding an Iraqi even if they both speak Arabic. The Holy Quran was written in Arabic. It is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations. There are many English words that can be traced to Arabic. Words such as reckon, alchemy, alcohol, algebra, algorithm, arsenal, candy, coffee, cotton, and so on. Number 4. Hindi. There are around 260 million Hindi speakers in the world, most of whom are from India. 3.54% of the world's population speak Hindi. The language has its origin in northwest India and is part of the Indo-Aryan language family. Hindi is a very useful language to learn if you are interested in venturing into the emerging Indian economy, and also if you are a big fan of Bollywood and you don't want to read the subtitles. Number 3. English. There are about 339 million English speakers in the world, which is about 4.61% of the world population. The language originated in England and is part of the Indo-European and Germanic language family. English is widely spoken in the United Kingdom, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, and South Africa, and it has official status in 67 sovereign states. The US has the most English speakers, with roughly 267 million speakers. It is the official language of the United Nations and European Union. It is the most widely learned second language in the world. The English language spread rapidly throughout the world via Britain's colonial past and the influence of the American media and entertainment industry, such as television, movies, and music. Number 2. Spanish. There are around 427 million Spanish speakers in the world. That comprises 5.81% of the world's population. Spanish language originated in Spain and is part of the Indo-European Romance language family. It is widely spoken in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. It is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations and is used as an official language by the European Union, the Organization of American States, and the Union of South American Nations. Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, and the US have more Spanish speakers than Spain, with Mexico having the largest Spanish-speaking population in the world with 113 million speakers. With over 50 million native and bilingual speakers, the United States has the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world after Mexico. The spread of the language is credited to Spain's colonial past. Number 1. Chinese, inclusive of Mandarin and other Chinese dialects. There are approximately 1.3 billion Chinese speakers in the world. The number makes up 17.72% of the world's population. The language originated in China and is part of the Sino-Tibetan language family. Chinese is mostly spoken in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia. In Singapore, it is one of the 4 official languages. Chinese is also one of the 6 official languages in the United Nations. Even though it is the most spoken language in the world, it is not very useful unless you intend to work or live in China and Taiwan, or for venturing into the booming Chinese economy, as China has the second largest economy in the world. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned next week for another video.